David Brewster here with New Brewster's Millions of Rants, and this is Living with a Vampire, 20 years of V-Amps, and this is 2024 now, and this actually marks the 20th anniversary of me using Behringer's old, Vampire or V-Amp, series of amplifiers. They stopped making these a long time ago, but I'm still using them for some, various reasons, and I'm going to explain myself. I've had tons of viewers out there ask, what's your rig, or what amp are you using, or why are you using that? Or there's actually been some people that were angry, like, I can't believe you're using that junky old, equipment. But regardless of your feelings about, Behringer's amps, actually this Vampire and, V-Amp series they made actually was really good. It was kind of a mimic of Fender Cybertwin, and of course the Line 6, Spider and Pod series too. So they were trying to compete, I believe, with Line 6 and Fender. They developed this. I mean, it wasn't really like a big hit or anything like that. I mainly bought this amp to teach with, like in my private lesson studio, and that's where it started. And then over time I started using it at gigs and recording sessions and jam sessions, and I played at a mall for VH1 and used that amp, and they filmed it. All sorts of different things. And it's eternally useful, and it actually has a great sound. Well, I've kind of dialed in a great sound, and I'm using kind of an unconventional amp in an unconventional way, but it's delivering what I consider my tone or my sound. And I don't really want to play or sound like anybody else. I want to sound like myself. I want to play like myself. And this amp definitely helps me deliver that, because nobody really sounds like this. It's just the Vampire tone, which for me, I think it's great. For other people, you might have your nose up in the air, you might be thinking, ooh, but it's a very useful amp. It's packed with features, and I'm going to run through, a little bit as far as this combo, and also kind of reveal like my main rig, and we're going to talk about these Behringer V-Amps. So here we go. Okay, here's my original Vampire combo that I bought back in 2004 to teach with. As you can see, I've completely filled it out here with all these, pins and patches and stuff and buttons, but it kind of became like an extra bulletin board right here. It has a single 12-inch speaker right there, which I kind of left space, obviously, to mic it. But it does have some issues. There's a broken effects knob right there, which that's been broken for, it's probably been broken for at least 15 years or so. It still sounds great. I don't really use this combo that much. I did initially use it on the channel, when I first started the channel here, but then I switched, to the rack system with the head rush cabinet. We're going to get to that in a second. But this is my original, Behringer Vampire 112, the LX112. And definitely the Jensen speaker they used with this original run, that Jensen speaker sounds amazing. I think they eventually switched it to Bugera. I didn't think the speaker sounded as good. It did change like the character a little bit. It has a really good like low end and kind of bassy, definitely a great amp. And it was like under $200, which is amazing. So in 2004, I was living and working in Evansville, Indiana, and I was actually teaching at More Music at that time. That's where I bought this. But I was working with a band called Detail, and I continued to work with them for about a year and a half, using this amp. Then I left Detail and joined a band called Bosko. So if you lived in the Evansville area and you saw Bosko, then you probably saw me play with that band using this amp. And that was between 2005 to about 2009. I also recorded the album Ladies and Gentlemen with Bosko, and that was in 2007. And that was using this amp and also a V-Amp Pro. And then from 2008 to 2009, I was actually endorsed with Behringer and Bugera, and they actually sent me a Vampire head back then, also a Bugera half stack. I think it was the 6464 half stack. And that was a cool half stack. I loved the clean channel. I just didn't really like the gain channel. It was too much. It was too heavy, and you really couldn't get that in between or bluesy, kind of classic rock sound. It was like all or nothing. So I did have, that setup for a while, and then I continued to kind of endorse and use, Behringer for a while. And I just find it interesting that those endorsements ended and other amps I had, kind of came and went or died or whatever. But I find myself still using this amp. I still have it in my studio. And I have some other amps and stuff over there. But it's just one of those pieces of gear. It still works. It's been very dependable, very reliable. And it definitely has a tone. And we're going to talk about that next. In the almost 5 years that I've been running this channel, I've noticed some viewers out there have left messages and comments that they've gone out and found Vampire amps, V-Amp Pro rack units, also the Vampire head version. And then that they've asked, like, what settings do you use, or how do you get your tone? And there's definitely one setting or one preset that I prefer. And I just use that setting all the time. That's where I start adding like different pedals, from my pedal board, or I start changing, like my pickup selection and stuff like that. I definitely do kind of tailor the EQ, maybe add gain or remove gain or whatever. But I do use that kind of like as my basic, tonal, I guess, palette or whatever. So I want to kind of recreate like what happened when I first plugged into this amp 20 years ago. And I'm going to skip, bank 1, because you have different banks here, and then for each bank you have 5 different sounds. So I prefer 2B. That's my favorite, Vampire tone. But like I said, I'm going to recreate kind of what happened when I first plugged into this amp. So here's 2A. Not a really good tone. It sounds kind of muffly and weird, like a wah, kind of half-cocked. But not a very good, version of that. Here's 2C. It's a little better, but it's still kind of weird. Real bassy and muffly. Here's 2D. Kind of a clean tone. And then finally 2E over there, like that. But then my favorite sound is 2B. And by the way, I'm just plugged directly into the amp. I'm not using my pedal board at all right now. This is just right into the amp. And then here's 2B. Here's my favorite sound, even though I haven't tweaked anything. This is just the preset. But when I heard this, I was like, hey, this amp sounds pretty good. The preset, right? That's not the sound that I normally use, but that's the right preset right there. A great like shreddy rock tone, right? Kind of like sounds like a modified Marshall to my ears. I'm not sure what it's supposed to be emulating, but it sounds good for sure. Now right there, if we remove the gain, take all the gain off, I remember doing this when I first plugged into it. All of a sudden now, it has this real kind of sparkly, shimmery, kind of blues rock tone. And immediately I fell in love with that. I was like, wow, it sounds great, like the in-between, settings on your guitar. It's also responsive to your volume, like if you roll your volume back, it kind of acts almost like a tube amp, which is cool. That's really cool. And it also has this really like instant connection. Like as soon as you pick or pluck or slur or whatever, you immediately hear it. You can feel it. And sometimes I've noticed with tube amps, it has a little bit of a sag or that tube kind of like delay in a way, like where you really hit something and it seems kind of sluggish to come out. With this, of course it's solid state, but it's as soon as you hit it, as soon as you play it, you hear it. And I really like that response. It just kind of jumps and pops when you play. Now, from moving the gain back, it definitely kind of settled that kind of roaring distortion. And from there, I would start maybe kind of adjusting the EQ. Let's do like a high noon. Let's do everything on 12. All right, so the gain, bass, mid, and trebles all on 12. And that's what you got. Now, right there, okay, this amp has some issues. For some reason, it stops working like that. That's one of the reasons, right? That's one of the reasons why I stopped using this amp, because it has some problems. Now it jumped back, and now it's gone again. So, yeah, like I said, these are very inexpensive, very cheaply made. This one's literally 20 years old, and I've definitely driven this amp like crazy. Hundreds and hundreds of gigs, hundreds of lessons, recording sessions, and all kinds of stuff. So the fact that this thing is finally wearing out, 20 years later, isn't really that surprising, because I have played the speaker out of this, guitar amp for sure. And now you can see I've actually switched back to my regular rig, the V-Amp Pro housed in the Gator Retro Rack, rack with the Headrush 112 powered cabinet. And I honestly made the switch because the other, my old combo, was malfunctioning and kind of acting up on camera. Somehow it magically made it through that opening jam without screwing up. But I didn't know if it was going to blow up or catch on fire, so I switched. But I thought we could actually investigate the difference in tone between the combo and the rack unit, the V-Amp Pro. So I actually bought this V-Amp Pro in 2018. I think it was on Reverb. It was like $65 or something back then. It was nothing. I mean, I didn't even break 100, buying that. But here's the V-Amp Pro on setting 2B through the Headrush cab. And the Headrush definitely has a noticeable distinct low end, definitely bassier. But here's what we got here. And that's just the preset. That's not the normal tone that I use, but that's the kind of starting point, I guess, right there. Very bassy for sure. Let me roll the gain all the way off. Now it's going to have a little bit more of that kind of stratty, spanky kind of character. We're getting a little closer there. That nice kind of blues rock kind of sound for sure. And as you start changing the EQ, you can start changing the effects. You can tap tempo the delay to different tempos or whatever. And you can really start kind of, zeroing in and kind of honing in on your tone using that V-Amp Pro as kind of a basic guide. All right, now and finally, here's my regular rig plugged into my pedal board. I've got the EP booster and SP compressor from Exotic. They're both turned off. And then the EQ settings on the V-Amp Pro, everything's rolled back to 0 or 1. The gain's rolled all the way off. The delay and reverb are kind of readjusted or kind of set a little bit differently, but we have this. Right. Now I'm going to start adding the EP booster and the SP compressor. So I'm going to add the compressor first. So here's without the compressor, like this. And then with the compressor, it just seems to pop and jump. Obviously it's a compressor, but it really seems to work well with that V-Amp Pro. The first time without, second time with. Here's without, with. So you can really tell the difference. Then you start adding the EP booster, which I have turned all the way down. So I'm just using it for a little bit extra grit and just a little bit more of an enhancement, like that. That's my neck pickup right there. Here's some in-betweens. And I really like setting, amps when I'm playing a Strat or a Tele, where you can really hear the single coils. You know, I don't want it to be like a chainsaw, just distortion, you know, mess. I like to hear the tone of my guitar, you know, whether it's the neck pickup or those in betweens. And if you use too much distortion, it kind of masks the pickup selector. You know, you don't really hear that big of a difference. I mean, you can tell the difference between bridge and neck, but then the in-betweens, you can't really tell if you use too much distortion or you have the wrong EQ setting. So that's what I'm usually going for. If I can get those spanky, kind of glassy tones, then I'm in the right neighborhood, and then I can start shaping or reshaping from there. Okay, and last but not least, actually I ordered another V-Amp Pro at the end of last year. This actually came from eBay, and it was from Japan, actually. And I didn't get this in time to include it in the Happy New Gear episode that I did, you know, once the New Year kind of rolled in. So I was waiting for this to show up. It actually showed up a few days ago. And it's brand new. I mean, it's technically used, but there's no scratches. It still has like the adhesive, like protective sticker over the display, manual with sticker, the box and everything. And it sounds great. You know, so I really just bought it as a backup. It was 130 bucks, which is noticeable. It's like over twice as much as what I paid for the original V-Amp Pro, you know, this one. So definitely over the years here, for some reason this is now suddenly more expensive or more valuable. It's like doubled in value or price. So it's not, you know, the end all be all. I am fully aware there are amps out there right now that just completely smoke this. That's not why I'm using it. I'm not sitting here thinking, yeah, this is the greatest amp ever. No, it's a cheap, you know, almost forgotten amplifier from 20 years ago. But it has a tone. It's very usable and functional. I've found so many uses, especially for that combo amp. It's crazy over the years. But I am looking for something to replace this equipment eventually. I just don't really know which way I want to go, really. I don't know if I want to do a combo amp or rack units, maybe investigate, you know, some more head rush stuff, or maybe that new amp from Fender. I don't really know. And I know there's a ton of options out there, but this was $130, kind of a backup insurance plan for this V-Amp Pro. And it's also going to buy me some time to kind of figure out like where I want to go or what I want. So it's inexpensive, but extremely usable for sure. Alright, that's going to wrap this episode of Brewster's Millions of Rants with Living with a Vampire. And like I just mentioned, I do realize what I'm using. Like, you know, I've had people in the comment section, you're like, you realize that amp's really junky and stuff, right? And it's like, no, I'm fully aware of what I'm plugging into and using here. I've had tons of amps over the years. An old Seymour Duncan convertible combo when I was in high school. Marshall half stack. I had the full 80 AMP1 rig. A Roland GP100 with a Marshall EL34 100 power amp through two 88 cabs. That was my big rig for a while. Various combo amps, PV Bandit and a Fender Rock Pro 1000 and tons of different stuff. Vox stuff. But for whatever reason, I've always found myself returning to this Behringer V-amp for whatever reason, and the Vampire. And I had a Fender Supersonic, you know, combo amp for a few years. I think I had it for about 3 years. And it just died a horrible death. Of course, it was on the road, too. But I laughed, like, after that amp died, I found myself plugging in to my old, you know, Vampire combo again. And I just laughed, where I thought, man, you know, the amp that was 10 times more expensive just died. And here I am plugging into this old, you know, dinosaur amp or whatever. So I've, you know, had them for a long time. I'm very comfortable using them. Definitely like the tone, you know, for certain things. And I don't know, it's functional. So I'm a use what you have kind of musician. And I definitely use everything that I have. There is nothing in my studio that sits and collects dust or whatever. I used every single pedal or piece of gear or whatever. And with those V-amps and the Vampire combo, like I said, I've had so much, you know, success using them. Great tones, you know, great performances and lessons and stuff like that. It's just kind of that dependable, reliable thing that I've always gone, you know, back to. And I would love to find something to replace it. I just haven't found it yet. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Land Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.